got one guess where we're going to start. We're going to start in the United States because the New York Times, it's showing one of the many protest groups rallying against Donald Trump's new immigration rules. The paper also looks at other directives Mr. Trump made in his first week in the White House, saying some of it was part of an unruly process, it calls it.
Well, the travel ban makes the front page of Gulf News. I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that. It has stories of people who've been left stranded, who've not been able to board planes. It writes about one couple who are in the United Arab Emirates for a funeral, but then couldn't get back to their two young daughters who were with their neighbour at home in America.
In France, on the same day, the Socialist Party chose its candidate for April's presidential election. There's a poll in Le Figaro which shows that in the first round of voting, the far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, would, if the vote were held today when this poll was taken, receive most of the votes of any of the candidates.
The Daily Telegraph quotes a former European Central Bank official who says it's time to think the unthinkable about the Eurozone, suggesting it should split up.
Fantastic Federer, the Independent calls him, the 35-year-old tennis star beating Rafael Nadal and winning his 18th Grand Slam title. This is such a big story, Sally. It's on the front page of the Financial Times as well.
I know, and I missed it. Can you believe it? I had a good reason, though. The Financial Times, this is what it's also looking at, how oil giant Shell is making moves to introduce battery chargers on petrol station forecourts. It's looking to adapt its business because of an increase in electric cars on the roads.
With us this morning is Stuart Thompson. Stuart is Head of Public Affairs, Government and Infrastructure at the law firm Bircham Dyson Bell. Good morning,
Morning,
Stuart.
Morning. Good to see you.
See you again.
Ellis Island, arriving into New York on a boat from anywhere in the world, and there's the Statue of Liberty. There's a poem underneath the Statue of Liberty which talks about, essentially, bring me your needy, come to this country. And now we have this.
It's a different type of America, isn't it? He's putting forward. It's a much more careful border controls, and this is just the start. This is what he was voted in to do. This is what his supporters want, and we'll have to see where it goes. I mean, it's going to be challenged through the courts, the protests, but fundamentally, people voted him in. He won an election. This is what they wanted.
Everybody understands about the need to keep your own country safe.
Yep.
The thing about the current status of refugees trying to come to the United States is they're already probably, I'm guessing, the most heavily vetted of anybody coming to the United States. I've read that it takes 18 to 24 months to be able to gain access to the United States as a refugee. How much more does Donald Trump want these people to be vetted, for goodness sake?
And I think that's a brilliant question, because there are only a certain amount of things that you can do as security services to actually, to check people and to go back. And it's, whether it's coincidence that the first countries that are chosen are Muslim majority countries, question mark. He's saying it's just, it's not a ban on Muslims, it's just a travel ban. But it's just very suspicious that they're the countries that he's picked upon. This will play well until there is another attack in the US. Now, if that then happens, all hell will break loose, because he'll have been through all this process, he'll have put all these new checks in place, and yet he still can't control his own borders. That will be the allegation that's thrown at him. So,
It's quite funny because, the New York Times, which we all know is not a huge fan of Donald Trump, we sort of make that clear, so their editorial line. But they talk about the fact that, a president always makes his mark, his or her mark, him in the case of the US so far, in the first 100 days.
Yep.
And it's talking about in the first 100 hours, it would seem Donald Trump is sort of making enormous strides, whether for better or for worse, in so many policy areas. I mean, this is just one policy area.
Yeah, you've got the wall and everything else. What he seems to be doing is just getting in there and saying, right, I promise this, I'm just going to do it. Now, in some ways, you can say that's hugely refreshing, shows he's not a politician, he hasn't gone in there and prevaricated. No, he's gone straight in there and done something. The trouble is, it's whether he's following process, whether any of his advisors are talking to anybody, and it comes back to some of that earlier, I hate to bring it back to sort of, Brexit and things like that, but, a lack of trust in experts. Well, you would say that, no, I'm a businessman, I'm just going to get on and do these things. And whilst we from here and around the world look at what Trump is doing, we will have our own challenges with immigration post-Brexit as well in the UK, and our relationship with other countries. So whilst we may be sort of, hugely dismissive of what he's doing and certainly questioning his approach, in a post-Brexit world, when one of those reasons for Brexit is allegedly about control of immigration, these are some of the challenges that we are going to have to deal with in the next couple of years as well. So, you know, it's very important, not just in a sort of day-to-day operation for, you know, businesses and Americans and the people affected, but for ourselves going forward as well.
Okay, I just want to look. We want to look at the American angle regarding the ban on those people coming from Middle Eastern countries.
Yes, certainly.
Here in Gulf News, which is from the United Arab Emirates, Trump's travel ban sparks chaos. But below that, American soldier dies as US raid in Yemen kills 14 terrorists. The Americans are fighting with Middle Eastern countries against the Islamic State group. So how will Middle Eastern countries feel now? There is an unverified report that Iraq is now going to ban all American applications for entry to their country. For goodness sake, what is that going to do to the fight against IS?
The trouble is, you take these actions, you say, right, this is what I'm going to do, and you just don't think about the consequences. And it's the consequences that will roll out. Now, you could look at the economic consequences, or as you mentioned, you know, the sort of tit-for-tat retaliation that will go on from other countries as well. And you're right, why will these countries fight alongside America when, frankly, it seems to be a very one-sided approach to dealing with the challenge? It's just all about the US and not about what happens in those countries as well. I think it's hugely worrying. The consequences will shake out over the next couple of days, legal challenges and other areas. But arguably, you know, if there's damage, it's already been done.
Now, France has got a very interesting spring ahead of it.
Yes.
With April-May presidential elections, and we now know who the candidates are. The latest one, Benoît Hamon, being added to the list. And as my guest was saying in World Business Report, the four choices, they're quite stark, the four different choices that are presented now to the voter.
Yes. You know, we can question how well the Socialist Party will do. They're apparently going through the doldrums, but the Socialist parties across Europe generally do, and particularly in France, they tend to sort of come and go slightly in terms of their popularity. What I think is going to be very interesting is, in the poll that you mentioned in the previous discussion, with Le Pen sort of being in front of in the first round, it's also who goes through to the second round. I mean, that's the really important part. Now, what usually happens is France will come together behind the candidate that's not the National Front candidate, Le Pen. Whether that will happen this time, I think, is a question. Partly because some of the other candidates, although noticeably not Hamon from the Socialists, are sort of, in some way, sort of looking to legitimise some of the concerns of the National Front. So instead of them very much being the outlier of politics and saying the unsayable, thinking the unthinkable, etc., these other parties are now sort of saying very similar things. So whether that gives her a boost come the second round and prevents the voters sort of effectively ganging up against her, I think will be the question for French politics and for the French electorate now.
And what she wants, one of her election issues, is leaving the Eurozone.
Yep.
It's quite interesting. In The Telegraph, there's this article about Jürgen Stark, who served on the ECB's executive board during the financial crisis, saying, actually, maybe the project is not the best thing in the first, you know, as we all believed when it was launched, the single currency.
Yes, and
maybe it should split.
Well, again, this is the consequence of European politics as a whole, I think, isn't it? Whether it's the future of the European Union itself or whether it's the future of the single currency, everybody involved is trying to look for ways to strengthen, redesign, reshape to prevent countries from leaving voluntarily or frankly, being excluded at some point. They obviously managed to get through the Greek crisis a couple of years ago, relatively unscathed. Whether that's the same for the Greek economy and the Greek population is I think, is a different matter. But the sort of structure itself managed to keep going. This is one idea. They'll have to keep coming up with them because they need to save these institutions, particularly with the elections coming up shortly as well.
Stuart, Sally and I are very disappointed to hear that you're not a tennis fan and you didn't watch the Federer final. I mean, I only watched the highlights.
Sadly not. But I mean, I'm not a big tennis fan, but you know, Federer and Nadal, frankly, I mean, hugely brilliant, talented, dedicated sports people. So you can't fail to be impressed by the fact that these guys just keep going. And at the age of, I think he's 35,
keep going, but they've had huge obstacles. I mean, in the case of Rafa Nadal, injury. I mean, I felt so sorry for him, and it stymied his chances in many Grand Slams.
Oh, they're both absolutely, as you say, incomparable.
But what an incredible
But
final.
if Roger Federer drove up in his electric car and said, "I'll give you a ride," would you get in?
Of course I would.
Yeah, electric cars, a fan?
Huge fan. But two things. I think first of all, the story about Shell and maybe other companies putting the charging stations in some of their outlets is a big bonus for the industry. To get that big shift is going to be important. But it does nothing for congestion. So it might help air quality, but actually, if there are too many cars on the road, it doesn't matter whether they're petrol, diesel or electric, you're still going to be stuck in traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. We need flying cars next. Stuart Thompson, thank you very much indeed. It's a Monday, so enjoy the rest of the week. Really enjoyed having you on the programme.
You too have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Always love it when you're with us. Bye-bye.